GM. Welcome to the Web3 Academy podcast, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. I'm Kyle Reedhead, and I believe that Web3 is going to change the world. And that's why we're carving a path for doers to confidently build and invest in Web3. Today, I'm joined with Rob Abelow, who is the founder of Where Music's Going, who's helping artists and builders grow more connected audiences through new technology. Rob has been in the music space for a really long time, and he's also someone who's very fluent in technology. And so he's guiding artists, guiding brands, et cetera, in the space in how they can continue to grow, continue to build a strong business, and maintain relevancy in a technological world. This discussion today, we dove into how music is going to be impacted with Web3 and blockchain technology, how it will be impacted with AI. We even talked into how it'll be impacted with the Metaverse, right? These are the sort of three encompassing areas of Web3, blockchain technology, AI, and the Metaverse. And so very, very interesting to gain Rob's thoughts on this and his perspective, because he's not just thinking through this stuff. I mean, he writes a newsletter, which is incredible, talking about kind of the intersection of music and technology, but he's also been in this space for a long time. He's spent 15 years in the trenches working with artists. He has founded a record label previously and an artist management firm. So he's kind of been in the weeds in the music industry for a long time throughout this sort of transition in the digital world. And now he's sort of like, he's deep into the Web3 space, really understands what's going on there, deep into AI. He just comes from so much experience to be able to combine the technology world and the music world and just sort of like zoom out and look at where this is all going and think a little bit rationally in that sense too. So very, very interesting conversation. I know we've done a few episodes on music and Web3. This one's one of my favorites by far. I think Rob is just extremely smart in this space and gives a lot of wisdom. So if you're interested in music, if you love Web3, this is the perfect combination. And it gives you just a good insight into where the music industry is going, some of the problems it currently has, but also how we're going to use technology to really create a positive impact on this industry and create better experiences for music listeners, ideally drive more revenues and more money into the pockets of musicians, and really so much more. So just such a great episode. I hope you guys enjoy it. Before we get into it, let's just take a quick second to hear from our sponsors.
The future of social media is here, and that future lives in Web3 on top of Lens protocol. Web2 social platforms are broken and ripe for disruption. You see, the epicenter of social media is the creators, and yet they are the most neglected. Web2 platforms like Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram are all essentially robbing creators of their worth. Creators are a new type of entrepreneur, forming new types of businesses. Yet with Web2 platforms, creators don't own their content or their profiles, and that's their product and business. Instead, they are tied to the platforms they choose to create on. Well, just like how crypto is freeing us from banks, Web3 is freeing us from these centralized platforms. On Lens protocol, creators own their content, own their profile, and even their social graph and followers in the form of NFTs. This allows you to move freely from one social application to another with your content, profile, and followers moving along with you. Lens protocol enables self-sovereignty for your social graph and interoperability across the internet. At Web3 Academy, we believe this is the future of social, and that's why we've partnered with Lens to ensure that the path of social media is heading in the right direction. Visit lens.xyz to learn more today.
Did you know that Web3 users lose billions of dollars every year due to phishing attacks? If you've been in the space long enough, then you or someone you know has probably fallen victim to one of these scams. This is why we've partnered with WAG, your guardian in this digital wilderness. WAG is a tool designed to help you spot the difference between malicious links and legit ones. With WAG, you can rest easy knowing that every link you click on is safe. This is an absolute game changer for Web3. As part of our partnership with WAG, we'll be using their platform to create verifiable links so that our community feels safe, knowing that what they're clicking on is the real deal. And if you don't have a community to protect and you're just looking to protect yourself, WAG has you covered with safe stops, which tell you exactly who created the link you're clicking on. Head to the link in the description, click it, see that it's verified by Web3 Academy, and start protecting yourself today. Just use the code FREE1000 when signing up, and if you're among the first 1,000 users, you'll get free access for life. Rob Abelow, welcome to the Web3 Academy podcast. Super excited to have you here. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Gal.
Yeah, look, we've been talking about music quite a bit. Obviously, we're Web3 enthusiasts here on the Web3 Academy podcast. Our community is Web3 enthusiasts, but I think almost everyone in the world is also a music enthusiast. So I think the intersection of music and Web3, and not even just, Web3 in terms of blockchain, but Web3 in terms of AI and kind of whatever else is going on in the internet right now, There's so much that technology is doing to impact the music space. And I think it's very interesting. And so we really want to get some insights from you, because this is a space that you are diving into with your newsletter. This is a space you've been, I know, working with a lot of others with. So let's just start here. Let's get a bit of your background. Walk us through kind of your journey in this space and sort of why you ended up here writing about kind of the emergence of technology in music.
I spent the last 15 or so years in the like traditional music industry managing bands and running a record label. The mentality or kind of the philosophy I always had when I working with all those artists, management or label, was kind of like the Web3 ethos before Web3 existed, the 1,000 true fans mentality. Although I always say, hopefully a lot more than 1,000 true fans, but taking that approach of, really engaging directly with your biggest fans, over delivering for them, and kind of like having that grow over time and having that direct relationship, and had a lot of success with that with a lot of different artists. I started seeing, the last 5 or so years, getting a lot more difficult for new artists to kind of break through with the technology, the way we listen, the way people are operating their mindsets these days. I moved away from taking the kind of one-to-one working with an artist approach to see how I could affect things in like a one-to-many systemic approach. And the first way I did that was working with some different music technology companies as an advisor and a consultant to help, but kind of got like Web3 pilled a few years back and through the music end, and seeing, okay, there was so many cool ideas I always wanted to do in terms of like incentive creation and fan clubs and rewarding our biggest fans that was just not feasible with the technology that was available. We would try like these kind of half-assed ways of doing it that either was made possible by Web3 or like eventually could be possible if all these kind of dots connect. So I went full down in that world. I founded a company called Doper with a couple of music neuroscientists that at first was creator tools, but went heavy into the music NFT space and kind of taking every bit of music and audio or any music NFT on chain and analyzing it, getting good metadata, giving you information about it, and then creating a kind of taste profile where you could find artists and projects you love based on other stuff you love. That's in the process of being acquired now. So I moved on from that. I really am in the mindset of there's been this democratization in music of creation and distribution and marketing, but there hasn't been a democratization of knowledge for those artists. And there's so many, artists trying to get into the business, either to be pro or as a hobby, whatever it may be. And I wanted to kind of provide a one-to-many resource for them on how to grow their business and how to grow something sustainable. So I launched Where Music's Going. It's music and kind of emerging tech. Web3 is a very, very big part of it.
Very cool. Very cool. I got to ask, what was it in Web3 that kind of give you the aha moment where it clicked to like, oh, this can apply to music? Was there already like a music NFT that launched?
Well, I mean, I was very familiar with crypto and an investor in different coins, but it wasn't, and there was already music NFTs. And when music NFTs first came out, I was very dubious, actually. Like I didn't see why it mattered. I'm all for artists making more money, but I didn't see like what the end value necessarily was for the user. I don't know what the moment was for me, but I remember I mapped it again. When I was growing up, I was a big fan of a band called Fish. And, they have a million different shows they play with different set lists. And there's these message boards where people, you can log in every single show you've seen from these like third-party sites, and it shows your stats. And everybody wants to wear this as this like proof of fandom, and it's fun, it's gamified. I was able to start mapping that approach upon everything being authenticated and verified and plugging in to everywhere else around the artist's career and what an artist could do with that and how fun the fan experience could be. And it just kind of opened up. It was just like taking these deep fan experiences and being able to like interconnect them and have the artist and fan know that somebody's done all these things. So I don't know what the NFT or what the project was, but at one moment the technology just clicked for me there.
Right. Okay. Very interesting. So for the listeners, we're going to dive into all the different sort of use cases of Web3 and the technology to sort of help with music in the industry. We'll also talk a lot about AI, I think, as well. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about just the current state of the music industry. We did a podcast a couple months ago with Austin Hurwitz, who's also pretty big in the music industry, doing a lot with music NFTs. It was a great discussion. And so he kind of gave us the whole history of sort of the music industry from back when it was like records to up until this point. We didn't dive a lot though in where the music industry is at now in terms of like streaming services and how that's impacting artists. So I want to just get a bit of a framework, if you don't mind, and just kind of set us up with like, where's the music industry at now? What is good of it with how we currently use tech for music? And I guess what is bad from it as well?
So yeah, I'll give you kind of, some of my thoughts on it. So we say the last decade, streaming kind of brought the record industry back from the break of what had been happening with Napster and free downloads and just unbelievable revenue drops. That's a good thing. It added more paying customers than we've ever had before that are like participating in the music industry, gave the entire globe like easy access to the entire catalog of music essentially that's ever existed. But kind of in the pursuit of scaling to like every incremental global customer at one low price, there's definitely been some consequences to that. So, music is very commodified. The context is ripped away and artists are detached often from their music and the way we listen to it. And it's very much so more than ever kind of songs over artist economy. You experience music in a playlist. It's got the branding of a tech company. It's recommended to you by them, that algorithm. All of those things are great and serve a lot of purposes, but it kind of changes the experience we have with music and definitely changes the experiences we have with artists. The kind of way I look at it is like the goal of, major streaming platforms is not to get you to fall in love with artists. It's to get you to not fall off the app, which is like essentially avoiding unpleasant or surprising experiences, which is where a lot of like serendipity and discovery and like deeper fandom actually end up happening. It's like where a lot of surprise happens. Add in kind of like the democratization I was talking about before means there's more artists and creators and songs than ever before. That's great that so many people can kind of participate, but with all of this, like the streaming has built the pie back up. Like it's bigger than it was in 2013, 10 years ago when Spotify like really started kind of growing, but it's actually not as big as it was even in 1999 on an inflationary basis. So you have one of like the biggest kind of like media sectors that everybody loves and participates in so well. And it's smaller than it was in 1999, which is a pretty hard thing to find anywhere else. Call that a success. And you compare that to video games that have grown, 270%, in 2013. And it's because they're kind of taking a very different approach and a much less passive approach to how people engage. So the way I look at it is like, lots of good things, more people than ever, all priced and kind of looked at in the same way, casual listeners, and that experience is super served. And there's lots of artists, lots of slices. The slices are really small.
Right.
So I think a lot of people right now are realizing how unsustainable that is. Even the business model seems to be pretty unsustainable. And there's a lot of good things here, but that there's more we're missing, more we can deliver on, more we can add on top.
Interesting. I saw a chart, I think it was yesterday on Twitter, and it was Sound.xyz, which is a platform for music NFTs. They had posted a chart and it was comparing the video game industry to the music industry. And it was like they've both grown in terms of like users in that and listeners, but the revenues of video games have gone basically exponential. I forget what the figures were. I think you might have just mentioned it as well. But music has almost stayed flat. Like it's gone up a bit, but not much, like you said. Why is that? Is it the business model? Is it the technology? Is it because there's, greedy labels that aren't allowing this to happen? Like, what is the reason for this kind of like fork? They seem to both be, like you said, are now in the ears of everyone, right? Everyone's playing video games. Everyone's listening to music. Why are we able to like generate revenues from it so much better in video games than we are in music?
I think there's a lot of reasons. I think one is that the perception is that music is free. You don't pay for music, you pay for the convenience. It's really the reality, right? It's like we all got to the point that music was free. We weren't going to pay for it. Spotify streaming came along and said, hey, listen, like we'll get rid of the viruses, we'll organize it really well. Eventually they end up recommending really well. You're paying for that. You're not actually paying for the music, and it's all a very low rate, hasn't gone up, but there's no way to get people to like incrementally pay in more through that experience. If people want to go deeper, if you're a really big fan or absolutely love something, there's very few ways to engage or gamify, especially directly in that experience. You need to go elsewhere. You need to seek out the artist. You need to go to their concert when they rarely come through, which are, not part of like the recorded music business. So I think it's kind of that like in video games, they're building a world that you love, but that's like the basis of how you're then going to go deeper and you're participating in it much more closely. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there for music, which we can get into for sure.
One of the things that I remember when I was talking to Austin, I had kind of a bit of an aha moment on the music world. To me, what I saw is that the music industry is almost turned to like musicians are like content creators. So content creators create content on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. They don't necessarily monetize their content, but they can monetize their audience by selling merch, by selling newsletters, subscriptions, courses, like other things, usually off platform. And it seems to me that that's kind of the way the music industry has gone. It's like you create music to grab attention, but you don't really make a lot of money off of your music. You then go and sell concerts and merch and like, I don't know, records if people still buy those and like whatever else. Is that a fair comparison?
It's a great comparison. I mean, even if you look at artists who are making money in streaming, I mean, it's essentially taking money that you maybe would have made in the first 2 weeks of an album release and it's spreading it out over a longer period of time. And even if that money ends up being larger for an artist who needs that now and needs to reinvest, it's not as helpful. It's why you kind of see it's like great for large catalog owners because they have time and tons of stuff that's out there accumulating, but it's harder for the individual artist. And I think what's a challenge for a lot of the artists is that, how do you connect with that person? How do you get them into that next space? What is that next thing that you're offering for them? What are those frameworks? What's that funnel? And how does everybody win? And how do you do it in a way that like can still be authentic to the content you want to put out? So it makes sense when someone's buying your concert tickets, et cetera. But if like you're trying to look at it as like Patreon model or something like that, it's often difficult for traditional music artists to use that business model because like they're not in the habit of like creating at that pace. And so I think it hasn't been like that. Yeah, it's just nobody's nailed that on like the traditional artist end quite yet. Web3 music NFTs have a possible solution there.
Interesting. Okay, so we've got a bit of an idea of sort of the big issue in this industry, which is that musicians aren't really making any money, or it's very difficult. And those who are, it's very like a small amount of musicians are really making most of the money. And we didn't really touch on this a lot, but is most of the money, I guess, going to the platforms? Is it going to Spotify? Like there is money in music. Where is that going? Is it just a certain subset of artists or is it going somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, people give a lot of bullshit numbers to make it seem like in some ways that's a bigger problem, I think sometimes than it actually is. Like Spotify takes essentially 30%, which you can argue that either way. But even if you gave 100% of what was coming in there, like it's just not that much play. I don't think that like solves the issue. Like I think we need to raise everybody's boats to win, raise like the water for everybody's boats to win. If you're signed to a major label, it depends on that deal, right? They're going to be taking quite a bit, but they're also going to put a lot of money and risk into you. Like you just have to debate that. For artists who are working with indie labels, it might be like a 50-50 split of what comes in. But there's more artists than ever before, and it's the fastest growing segment. We're releasing directly through, TuneCore, DistroKid. They're paying $10 a year for distribution, and then they're getting all of the money Spotify pays through. So it's different for each artist type. To me, there's a lot of money, but it's that the people who are making the most on it are the ones who own deep catalogs and especially have a very long like back catalog because older artists are getting revived and are a bigger part of the pie. But with so many different artists and creators coming in and 120,000 songs a day, and AI bringing that up, I think even the major labels now are realizing, okay, this pie is getting split in so many ways. Like, how can we do this in a way that, the people who are the most committed win, the best artists win, they get money to them and they can kind of redevelop instead of everybody making such a small amount. I kind of think of it as like the Uber thing where it's like, okay, this thing came in and democratized cabs and we were all really happy at first because it was subsidized by VCs. So we just had cheap cars that were always available and were really nice. But then as the business model became closer to reality, those costs were not sustainable. The cars got crappy. It was more expensive. It's less available. And it turned out you just blew up an entire industry. And now instead of having these cab drivers careers, we have tons of people who are just hobbyists. There's a similar element of that to music, and you have to weigh, okay, how much of that is great? We want anybody to be able to come in, but we also want to make sure that dedicated artists who potentially have a big future have enough going back to them that they can stay in and cultivate their career.
Right. So it sounds like there's two things we need to do. One, we need to figure out how to redistribute the pie so that the pie gets distributed to the people that deserve it or are putting in the most work. And the pie, I mean just revenue in the music industry. And the second is we need to grow the pie. We need to make the pie bigger. We need probably different business models, which might mean different technologies that are going to allow us to do this, or somehow we need to cut costs in between all that, right? So that there is more pie ultimately and less like money getting lost throughout the system. That's my assumption of what we need to do here. Can you give us a high-level overview, zoom out a little bit here, and walk us through like best case scenario or what you think is going to happen with music? Actually, you can do two things here. What you think is going to happen and what you wish would happen. Maybe it's the same thing, maybe it's not, I don't know. And walk us like the next, 5-10 years. We've got Web3 coming in, we've got AI, we've got obviously whatever Spotify, these other streaming services are doing that are all kind of changing the dynamics of the music industry. Give us your sort of like high level overview of where you think it's all going.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just starts from what the mindset is of artists and what kind of the incentive structures are underneath the infrastructure that we all use. I think things have become more passive, but a lot of that just has to do with like the ease of the technology and kind of the nudge. I'd like to see things go more like from followers to fans. If you think about like music, it's not only more passive because of streaming, it's because like everything is competing for our attention and it's constantly available to us. Any moment I can look at my phone, get content, go to social media. I'm not going to lay on my sofa, turn off the lights and listen to a full record. Like it's just I'll probably last 1 minute before I pull up my phone. But in some ways that's music's superpower, is that it's like an accessory to everything. And it coexists with so many other things that are out there. But I think we're seeing like a shift back to how can we be more engaged, or what are solutions to get people more engaged that are similar to video games. I think even like TikTok is like a step somewhat in that direction, maybe not in the way that I or someone would want, but it's music being part of the content that people are creating and they're sharing and they're participating in it, they're spreading a meme, they're putting their stamp on it. And I think that's actually fascinating. And you can see Spotify even chasing that a bit. With the new changes they made to like their homepage and app, they're trying to make listening on Spotify less something you do with your pocket in your phone and more you do in your hand looking down. Is that going to work? I don't know, but I think it shows like a fear of like something like TikTok and an understanding of there is a craving for this super fan or for people to have more access or like bigger and better content. So I think like the passive and it really engaged can coexist. Taking like the video game parallel more with AI and other tools that are coming out, I think it's about how do you get fans to be able to co-create and have the song almost be like the beginning part of the process that they're consume. I call it like consumer creators. So music is being put out to them, but they're putting back into it. They're putting their spin on it. They're creating for themselves. They're creating for their friend based off of that music. Are there ways to kind of use that technology to get people to participate more deeply? We're seeing it with like with Beatport. It's essentially like an electronic music service where like a lot of the customers are like amateur DJs, and like we're actually seeing downloads like skyrocket there. And it's because what they're doing is they're buying the music so that they can use it to make their own DJ sets or build on top of it. And I think like more and more people being able to participate in music because tools make it easier and easier for them to do so, they're going to end up becoming consumers of the biggest and best, most influential artists. You're never going to pay much more than what you're paying right now to consume music, but you'd be willing to pay a lot more if you're going to buy this new sample pack, if you're going to be able to like have the ability to iterate on a song, to put your stamp on it, to share that. So I think that's one possibility that's really interesting. I think another is just putting, different kind of incentive structures to bring people closer together. So that could be the streaming platforms having different tiers, having subscribe directly on platforms to artists where you're getting more additional direct content from them. But it's also artists having a mindset that the goal isn't streaming numbers or followers. The goal and the mindset is to build fans. So I'm going to create music, not kind of going after the viral rat race, but that's this long game of bringing people deeper into my world. Can we have kind of formats and systems that enable them to do that? Which is why I like Web3 and NFTs. I think if you have things you can sell to people that are your core fans, that they're paying a lot more money for, and you're capturing that full demand, it changes the artist's mindset to say, I'm going to create for these 100 people, these 500 people, these 1,000 people. And that's how I'm going to build my career up from there. Instead of I'm going to build my music for these millions of people, hoping a small percent kind of like it. So long-winded way, but I think those are some different avenues that could happen.
Okay, that makes me want to pull on a lot of different threads there. The interesting part for me, just in that last section there of the 1,000 true fans kind of thing, is I actually had a question here to ask you, because one of the things that every time I talk to someone in the music industry, they're like, the problem is music has become too passive, which is how you started off saying the same thing, right? My pushback is always, isn't that just what people want? Don't we just want an ease of getting access to all the music and just listen to whatever? Are we trying by saying like, hey, let's get people to buy albums again, or let's get people to do this? Like, are we pushing against gravity almost, right? Like maybe that's just not the direction that people want to go to consume music. But I think what you bring up is a good point, is that I'm sure there are a certain amount of people that will pay anything because they go to every concert. You know what I mean? They buy all the merch. Like, these are your 1,000 true fans, and they will buy other things. They will buy albums if albums still existed, right? I remember back when I was younger, I would go and buy CDs for artists I like, even though I could get the music on Napster. But I was just like, Jay-Z, that's who I loved when I was a kid. I was like, I'll buy his albums. You know what I mean? I support him. It was the only albums I would buy just because I loved him, you know? But then I was like, well, but now everyone's just listening passively. It's so easy, right? Like now I don't even know who I'm listening to. I just tell Google or, you know, Alexa, like play music of this style, and then it just starts playing music. And I'm like, I don't even, friends are like, well, who is this? I'm like, I have no idea. Right. So it's like, we've kind of gone on this passive route, which I like, but I think you're right. There's probably a certain subset of fans for each artist that are willing to pay more. Right now, they only have the option to pay, what is Spotify, $12 a month, which doesn't even go to artists. But if we find new ways of creating, I guess, experiences or I want to say products, you're saying we can grow the pie by adding additional products that these sort of like 1,000 true fans would actually come out and purchase. And it might be more than 1,000 just using that word.
No, I think you're saying is right. Like it has to be easy. Something that a lot of the solutions that people present, especially in Web3. But I mean, listen, I get pitched 5 new music platforms and products a day.
Right.
What people don't understand is you can't just say this is going to make artists more money and they're going to own their data. And they can name their price. There's no middlemen. It's like great, but like if it's a marketplace and there's nobody buying on the other end, it's irrelevant. I'm happy to give somebody 30% and they can keep all my data if they're going to put me in front of millions of people that turn into fans versus somebody who's doing 0. So you have to think about what fans actually want and make it easy for them. I think video games, like most of this is driven by whales, right, is what they call them. So they're buying an incredible amount of skins and upgrades and things like that. We don't have a way of monetizing whales or capturing that demand particularly well in the music industry. And if we do, it's on this kind of outskirt. It's not in-game. Imagine the video game. It's like instead of buying in-app stuff, they went to the game, they loved it, and then they had to like follow the creator of the game. And then like that person would like give them more content on social media. And if they really liked them, they'd follow their email. And then eventually they'd sell them the skin. Like, that's how it works. The process is so difficult to get to that upgrade. But if we have experiences that you're living in where you can just like upgrade right within it and it's fun and it's easy and it's addictive, it's one button, it's like, I really want to do this additional thing. Those things are helpful. I also think, you know, there's kind of like the gamesmanship where there's a lot of people who it's really important to them. Like if you get like your year-end Spotify information and shows you're like the top 1% of a listener for somebody, people love that. They share it. It's Spotify's best marketing tool. If, you know, we're able to kind of look into the lens of like, this is your fandom with an artist. You listen to them this much. You've been to this many shows. You've done this many things. There's a certain subset of people where that's going to drive them to go deeper and they're going to want to buy more, spend more. You can reward them for that, having that knowledge between fan and artist. There's a band called Avenged Sevenfold, who's like a pretty large metal band who's gone all in on this. And they're doing an incredible job with that. And I think with all these things, listen, there's a bunch of people who do not care. And I think everyone pretty much is even happy with streaming. Like even in your example, I'm always happy with streaming and how much it provides to me. I do end up realizing that it slowly nudged me away from finding artists and bands like that. So like I have less stuff that maybe I want to go drive 4 hours for and see a show and I know every word of every song. But if I need music in the next 30 seconds to please whatever situation is happening, there is 0 chance I won't be able to find it. And that like they've solved that. It's how can we layer things on top to kind of solve the other issue and make sure the 10 to 20% of fans who are going to drive 80% of revenue, let's actually do that. So I think that's what we're not doing right now.
Interesting. This is great. I never thought about it this way. And you know what's interesting is when you say the whales, like in gaming, you have the whales that they can buy. In the music industry, they don't really have that. The way that the whales can purchase is, but they have to do something physical. They have to go to a concert somewhere in the world, which actually isn't that profitable for musicians, right? They've got to pay the venue. They got to pay like all the different, there's so many middlemen there. And so the only way to sort of monetize outside of these streaming services is these physical things, which are not like merch is good, but not a crazy profitable business. Concerts are good, but not crazy profitable. If it's fully digital, like what you said in video games, these are just digital goods that people are buying. It's almost 100% profitable. Music sort of needs that. People will pay for them, but what is the thing that they're going to get? Very interesting.
You nailed that point. I think that like there's very few digital ways of doing it. And the operating expenses of a lot of those things mean that they're not profitable until you get to a pretty large stage in your career.
Right.
But it's, getting to that point is difficult.
Right. Let's jump into Web3 a little bit. I want to go into AI. I want to go into Web3. Originally, I was going to do AI first, but I think there's a lot to talk about here on the Web3 side in terms of my assumption is when I ask you how we're going to build these products and we're going to monetize more to these, let's call them whales again, or like the 1,000 true fans, I think probably NFTs or Web3 is going to be a lot of the infrastructure we need to do this. Can you sort of walk us through some of the things that either you're seeing or that you think are going to happen of how we can start to find new ways to monetize for musicians anyway? Is it music NFTs? Is that kind of the big thing that you're seeing? Or is there something else that I'm missing as well?
It may or may not be. I go back and forth sometimes on music NFTs or even the technology being necessary to like deliver on the ethos, or sometimes it's like we take this philosophy back and at least for now we can use other forms of technology or other like delivery formats. When I kind of first came into this space, like I was always a little uncertain about kind of like audio or like song, like kind of what we think about as like the traditional music NFT, which is like, I buy this because I could maybe flip it or sell it for later if this artist gets bigger. I want that to be true. I want people to value music in that way. I don't know that that really works. I don't know that like the over financialization of music in that sense is actually what artists want to do and how like the relationship they want to have with their fans. What I do think is the tokenization of every interaction that an artist and a fan have with each other, knowing that, having that, and being able to build experiences on top of that, even to the point where eventually, hopefully, fans have no idea that's the technology that's doing this, but they're getting all these experiences that say, hey, when you walk into every new room, new platform, new thing you do, it understands if you want, the artist you love, the artist knows you're the biggest fan, and therefore you get the first pre-sale. They get rewarded, like they can create kind of different blank canvases. Can you then sell music NFTs that are representative of like a one-of-one piece of art or song, et cetera, and maybe, have those be really profitable? I hope so, but I don't know that like that's necessarily the format of sale. Mm-hmm. Or if it's just, to me, I'm more bullish on it being like the portable identity and proof of fandom.
Right.
For somebody.
So when you say music NFT, do you see this? I think where people get confused is like you don't actually own the rights to the song. At least I haven't seen any platforms that are actually doing that. It's more the thing you're buying is, I mean, sure, you're buying the song, but that song's probably also going to stream on Spotify, so you didn't need to buy it. But what you're buying is the experience that goes with that song. Is that how you see music NFTs? That's how I think they're going to play out, is like I buy whoever that I'm a big fan of and they have a new song. There's, I don't know, you can buy 1,000 people can buy this song's NFT. Again, I'm not buying the rights to that song, but maybe there's, I don't know, I get to like join some event that happens when he or she releases this song, or like there's something else I get to do. I get a merch that's representative of the song. Like, I'm not sure, but they create an experience around that thing. And it's only those holders are the ones that get it. And so it's great for me. I'm giving money right off the bat for that thing because I like the song. I like the musician. The artist makes a little bit more money, and I get some sort of closer connection with me and the artist. Is that sort of how you see them, or is there more to that?
Well, I think it's muddy because music NFTs encompasses a lot of different stuff. You have what I think is maybe starting to be called on-chain music, where you have music NFTs that are a song or an album NFT. They may or may not have more utility layered in. Then you have like a membership NFT. Then you have something that's with merch or maybe a piece of vinyl. There's also royalty NFTs, Royal, Oculus, and another block are doing.
Yep.
You are actually buying an interest in the streaming rights of the song. More than anything, what that shows is that like this is a blank canvas. This is a technology, not a product. And music NFTs as a product name is probably wrong. It's like saying internet music. And that would represent not just music on the internet, but also like merch and like digital tickets. For me, buying those individual song NFTs, I have not gotten to the point where I'm like, yes, that totally makes sense for like the end consumer, unless they are like a patron. Where I do see value is, like you said, like how does that bring them deeper into the artist world? So if you bought any of my song NFTs, now you get access into my community. And in that community, I can see all of the interactions you've had. And based on that, it changes your experience there. And I can gamify that and make that as interesting or, as I want. The problem sometimes I see with like every successive song that you release being released on chain, like I like that. But the idea that that's going to make every song worth more, they're going to go up in value. It's like, well, the nature of a recording artist is they're going to release more and more music, and it's like dilutive to the previous thing. So I just think, to me, I like it. I don't like it in the sense of you're buying it because you're going to sell it.
Right.
I think you're buying it because it's like a further proof of your interaction with this artist. And maybe it opens up a portal to some bigger experience.
Right. That's exactly how I see it playing as well, although there will always be some speculative nature because that's just how this space works. But I agree. I don't see there being value in buying a music NFT just because you're buying it. I think it's the experiences or whatever comes with that. And then I think from the artist perspective, they want to use NFTs because it's like a data point, right? Like you said, it allows them to see what else they're doing on chain. It's an interoperable standard, so it allows them to create an experience both on sound or whatever, and then in their, Discord community or token gating merch or whatever, so they can do things across the internet with it. And then maybe royalties. Do you know much about Royal and how this all works? Like, how are they sharing royalties to holders from Spotify and that? I don't understand how that functions.
Yeah, so the way it works is they're doing only the songs that have previously been released. That's the way they see it around having kind of compliance issues right now. It's not an upcoming unknown track. You're buying, so the artists can decide they're going to give away 50% of the future streaming royalty share of a track or tracks. And then they fractionalize that into NFTs, you buy it, and then every period, maybe it's a month, maybe it's every 3 months. There's not a direct pipeline right now, so it's like the artist shares their statements with Royal.
Okay, so it's like a trusted process.
And then Royal distributes it out to everybody every quarter. I know that they're making some changes in their platform about how you can have a bigger part of your experience with the artist. Royal does it like artist to artist. Another block is doing it by finding producers and songwriters who have a small share of massive tracks, like Rihanna and The Weeknd. They're selling some of their interest.
Mm.
So what's really interesting about these things, and like I think it solves a niche problem. I've sold catalogs from artists I work with to essentially a bank, right? So like, okay, it'd be great if you have access to more places of liquidity, especially if you're a small artist and a bank isn't interested in analyzing your song or songs. If you could sell it to fans or potential fans, maybe there's extra benefit there because they're coming along for the ride. They're going to bring more people in. Maybe they become fans through this process. If they resell it, I make more money so long as we're upholding royalties. There's different advantages there. Also, maybe I have like more control over what I want to sell. Often when you're selling to like a bank or someone else, it's like they just need everything. So there's some good there. I think it also just comes with some like, if you're trying to make more money than is fair, I think you're selling yourself short as an artist because like these are the people who love you. There's nothing more important than that relationship. So it's just a very delicate thing. But I think it's a nice tool to have as long as there's enough people buying on the other side and like that no one's getting screwed, essentially.
Well, I was going to say if the artists aren't even getting enough, that was kind of the main problem we talked about. And now artists have to share it with their fans too. Like that makes it even worse, right?
I would never say like you're not getting enough. So like artists who are doing well on streaming, they'll make good money. I think it comes in slower. Because of that, it's like a steady annuity that people can reliably assume will make X. So listen, like if this is going to make $100,000 in the next 10 years and you're going to pay me $75,000 right now, but like, that's not like what most NFT traders are in it for, like to make like a solid investment over a decade, right? It's like, we're going to flip something tomorrow.
Right. Okay, so there's a lot of different use cases. It's just summarize. There's a lot of use cases with NFTs and blockchain in general, and we don't know which one's going to win out, or it's probably going to be a combination. We'll have to see, but likely it's going to be something that connects the artists and their fans more closely. You know what's one other one that I think, and you sort of mentioned this at the beginning, I remember when I was in college and I had found a DJ, his name is Chami, who's like somewhat big now, but it's very small. I found him on like SoundCloud, I think it was. And I shared it with all my friends. And then all of a sudden he like came to Toronto, we went to his concert, and then like he became really big. And I was just like, damn, I wish there was a way that I could have like either made money on that or proven to people that like I was early on, you know? And I think blockchain does that by collecting NFT, even if it's just free, right? It doesn't have to be paid or anything, but proof of fandom, I think is actually a big deal. Now, not for everybody. And so there's some people listening going, I don't care, I would never pay for that. I think there is a lot of people that would, to be like the first of the 1,000 to listen to a song, and they might pay X amount just to prove it. Like, I think you get a lot of people that would do that in the music world.
And maybe sometimes it's not even paid, or, you know, who knows what that experience is. I think that we need more like human tastemaking and things like that. Like, I can show that I have incredible taste. I was early on all these things. What does that like open for me? Like Taylor Swift does some, or the next Taylor Swift, right? Like, so does some partnership at every venue with some like booze. And part of the partnership is that if you were one of the first 1,000 people to have ever listened or collected to like this artist, you're going to get in backstage. Other people are going to want to access you because like you are like an important, eventually you can show that like you have cachet. I think by you controlling that data, instead of maybe like some third party, well, I can go kind of like utilize this data that I have with that artist or, you know, in all these different places.
Right, which you don't have access to when you're blocked by.
People make fun of the metaverse. I'm like not fully there. But the reality is like kids are living in Roblox and Fortnite and have a very different life and experience than people my age. That's only going to increase. You're going to spend more and more time in digital places. And also people love collecting things. In fact, we're seeing vinyl is like, you know, having its best year. Yeah, you know, like it's still small relatively. And 50% of people who buy it don't even own a record player, right? Like, and I bet this is my proof of fandom. You know, so you're spending more time in digital places. You love to collect things. How do you wear that band t-shirt you used to wear to show part of your identity? How do you invite people in your house where you show your vinyl collection? There's a potential there for once like the places for it to exist are natural and organic, where it's like, oh, wow, like that's your record collection, or like those are the artists that you've backed provably in certain spaces may become valuable.
I devastated. And it's funny, I was actually just about to go into Metaverse. I know we did in the our brief, we didn't even talk about this, but it brings up a good point. When I think of Web3, there's sort of three technologies that are part of it. There's blockchain, which is where you get NFTs, crypto, et cetera. There is advanced computing, which is AI, machine learning, et cetera, which we're going to touch on that. And then there's immersive experiences. So that's VR and AR. Those kind of like technologies are all sort of coming together. We talk about this a lot. One of the things I was just thinking of is Metaverse is becoming a really big thing. And yes, it's not in the older crowd yet, but like for those who are gamers, they are all like, there's a lot of older people playing Fortnite, right? And they live in these digital worlds. But there has been this kind of like over the last few years, especially because of COVID, concerts that are happening inside of digital metaverses. I think Fortnite had some concerts before. I've seen some crypto ones. It's not like Deadmau5 and Paris Hilton, and I forget who else were all in like Decentraland. And it wasn't terrible experience. It was a little bit weird, but it wasn't terrible. But I imagine as the technology gets better, like the Apple Vision Pro headset, and you're in a concert wearing those, it's actually going to be pretty decent. And so I wonder, there's a way for you to sell scalable tickets to scalable concerts that will be almost completely profitable. You don't need to worry about all the physical stuff. So I guess there's another avenue. And then the other great thing about it is based off of tokens and things that the audiences hold in their wallet, whether that be NFTs, music ones, whatever, or proof of fandom, they can get different access within those metaverse worlds. So I think there's actually a big play on that too. Is this something you're thinking through, or am I just going like way down off the deep end?
Well, I think like Apple Vision Pro especially gave a lot of like, okay, where is this going, right? Like, you know, like the fact that it's Apple Vision Pro makes you realize it's going to be an Apple Vision Air.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
What's it going to be like in 10 years? I think a lot of that's like when I'm in my living room and I can just see, it all happening right there. And something I hadn't really thought about, so you just mentioned it, but it's like, well, what if I'm watching the first 20 minutes of the concert that's free for everybody? I was just scrolling whatever social media and I'm like, oh, this artist I love is doing a show. Let me hop in. And then 15 minutes in, it's like, okay, like, going forward, you have to have this token in your wallet to watch the rest of it, right? Like, there's just so many different ways that those things intersect, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's very interesting. I didn't plan to talk about that, but just it came to mind. So very, very interesting there as well. But I think we're still years from that becoming a thing. I just want to say to the listeners, like, we get all excited about the metaverse stuff. It's cool. Kids are in it, but I think we are, I don't know, a good 3-5 years before it becomes somewhat normal. So I think we still got a lot of time there. Okay, the last technology I want to talk about, because this has kind of been the big thing of 2023 really, is AI and how AI is impacting music. And I say that in terms of, we saw what happened with Drake and the AI renditions of his music, of new songs that were being created using Drake's voice, which were actually really good, in my opinion. And then, of course, the problem of that, like, what do we do if everyone's creating music of someone else? But I think that's also kind of to go off what you said at the beginning of sort of remixing content and everyone can be a creator. Like, it's going to really accelerate that. And I think Drake's lawyers were trying to shut it down, but then you have Grimes, who was basically saying, hey, everyone, please do this, and we'll actually share in revenues for those who create songs with me. So two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. I guess let's just start AI in general. What are you seeing? How do you think that this impacts music? Is it just people can make songs with it and they'll copy other people's voices? Or is there way more to this?
There's way more, because that's just the most like controversial and like trendy. And I think there are things that are going to happen from that. It's funny, right before we got on, a Rolling Stone article came out, a great one. I was actually quoted in, it's about this. The writer, he told me on our call, like, he's talked to a lot of estates of artists who passed, and they're the most interested in this technology. They can put out new stuff, and it opens up a whole lot of ethical questions, but it's really fascinating. I think with the vocal deepfakes, like, we're going to get a handle on it. There's a lot of solutions being built, like you mentioned, the Grimes one. There's others, and there's a lot of people in the background trying to create kind of like licensing. So like, it's opt-in, it's licensed. There's ways for the originators to monetize. I think it's going to go beyond vocals. I think it's going to go to style. I think it's going to go to like songwriting kind of ability. I think it's a really great way for the best artist I look at it as like, the best artist derivative works are your legacy, and like, you want as many of them as possible, right? So like, if you're the Beatles, you're the most cover band of all time. You're James Brown, you're the most sampled artist of all time. Like, that's amazing to your legacy, and that makes you continue long even after you're gone and your ideas regenerate. This is like the next version of that, like exponential. We need to get a hold of it in a way that's beneficial. It doesn't just pervert and take advantage of. So I think I posted something recently about like traced AI, which is something that in a more closed system where, it's like I'm working with something in the style of Frank Sinatra, or Metro Boomin. It's using the voice of this artist. That artist has opted in, it's licensed, they're getting shares if you commercialize it. I think maybe a lot of times it's not even like in a commercial space. Like, think of it as like the new TikTok or somewhere else where like, I'm sharing fun things with my friends, or like just for myself. Or I think of like Guitar Hero. Think about that in this era of like playing and participating in new songs. So I think there's some really interesting stuff there. Generally, AI, whether it's generative or other forms of it, is just going to make it a lot easier for people to become creators and to pump out a lot of music. It's going to be more songs than before. Everyone's so scared of the negative effects of that. I feel like we already almost hit the ceiling of how many songs could come out to like the negative of that. Like, there's already like 100,000 songs a day that don't get listened to even once.
Wow.
Does it matter if there's a million more?
The good ones will rise.
Actually, I think what's going to happen is that the streaming platforms and the distributors are going to have to reckon with this, and there's going to actually end up being a little bit more gatekeeping than there's been. They can't even just hold that much data and music. It's just not cost effective. So I think what you'll end up seeing is like solutions that solve not just the AI problem, but already the problem we were having with like BS content. I think people are going to like yearn for like humanity in like the artists that are delivering stuff and like originality. Like we've already been creating for the algorithm for the last 10 years. I think it's going to help push. You can't beat creating for the algorithm compared to an AI. So it pushes, I think, originality and like standing out further. I think it's going to push artists who are like community building as a skill further. Where it's going to be the most detrimental is artists that are producing music that's like a 9 to 5. So it's like functional in terms of like its background of a YouTube video or a segue between these two things. So like Epidemic Sounds can just replace that now, like in a button. Or functional music, which is taken off, and now AI can recreate meditation sounds, but yet it's branded as James Blake's AI version of it that he didn't even really do. That's going to happen. So that's going to be tough for like smaller artists. But at the end of the day, like it's just another great tool that you can use or not use. And there's going to be artists who use it and like do incredible new things in new genres and they'll succeed. And there's going to be artists who are like totally against it. So you think of like the 80s, there was all this Casio music. Then there was this pushback against like this over synth, overproduced, and we had grunge. Like I think there's going to be a similar thing where it's like we get this wave of AI music, whether, you know, whatever it is, and then we're going to get this wave of like, man, I want like whatever the antithesis of that.
Yeah, right. One of the things that I thought maybe was going to happen is if an artist, let's say it's Drake, right? If anyone can make music using his voice, we already all very accustomed to his voice. We like his tone of music. That's why he's so successful. And now there can be thousands of Drake songs made every single day. Drake gets to a point where like he becomes just a distribution platform and he doesn't even really need to make music anymore, right? Now it's all about how can you build your own branding, get a big following. You said community building. So community building, marketing, whatever you want to call it. But how can you get the attention? And then people can create the music for you and you just sort of curate it. And then you just say, hey, I approve of this song. I approve of this song. And like, you're now the distribution channel to get your music out there. I guess the scary part of that is it means the big get even bigger. And then it's like, how do you even fit in if they're doing that? I don't know if that's actually how it plays it, but that's the way that I thought of it when I started to see this whole AI stuff with Drake. Any comment on that?
It's tough because you're right in that, like, you know, who cares about an AI deepfake of somebody who's not already popular, right? So like, on the other hand, it's the people who are popular who have the most to lose with doing these things, right? So they're going to be fearful. It's going to hurt their brand.
Yeah.
So I think there's some that are going to play with it. I think they're really going to want tighter controls on it. Like what can be commercialized? Do they have to approve it? Maybe it has to stay in a certain ecosystem. I think there's this like music Web3 community, I guess is what you call it, called Oh My God Kirby. They create all these different songs and like, but everybody could create like different versions of the music based off of, you know, some central thing, and they could all release it like to Spotify and end up like being really successful. And I just think like, what about like community led artists? And like the voice isn't necessarily like a deep fake, but it's like some synthetic thing that everybody's sharing and building iterative stuff off of. And we've got a community of like 500 producers to novices working together and like releasing it. It's like a super organism artist. I don't know, maybe there's some interesting use cases there.
And that's kind of what TikTok is remixing content, right? Like someone makes this thing and then you take that and you add one more thing. And it's like, I wouldn't call that, well, it is kind of community-based creations of music because like they're kind of doing that. But Oh My God Kirby is, I forget how many people are in that, but they're doing the same thing. It's got a bunch of them coming together to make it. It's actually quite interesting. And I think AI just makes that even more, I guess, possible or scalable. The one thing I think of the emergence of AI and blockchain is, as you were saying, like the reputation of big musicians who might not want others creating music is if everyone's just signing transactions for their content, like verifying like, hey, this was me, like all Drake's music moving forward is posted on the internet and published or minted from Drake.eth, then that's how you know, okay, Drake was the one that actually either made it or approved of this one. And if it's not minted on the blockchain by Drake.eth, then you know it's a fake. You know what I mean? Like that might be the solution to it. I don't know if that'll actually happen, but that's kind of my prediction. All right, we've gone on a little bit long here. We've got to start to wrap up, but I don't want to wrap up just yet because this has been a great conversation, Rob, and I appreciate all of your answers. What I want to know, speaking of predictions, is there anything in the coming, I don't know, year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, that is sort of something you predict is going to happen in the music industry, whether that's like a big black swan event? I know those things you can't predict, but like something that's going to really change the industry, kind of like how streaming did, Is there anything on your mind that's like, this is probably going to happen, or this is the direction I'm seeing it's going?
What I have is I do think there's going to be some pretty massive, like essentially synthetic artists that are going to be massive, possibly community led, but we just did that. So that's not interesting. Something that like I've been holding back on saying is I think within the next few years, you might see Amazon buy Spotify.
Interesting. Okay.
Could have some which would have dramatic effects on music, not the least of which because, and I have no information on this.
Of course.
It's just, there's no big music platform where music is their business, like their core business. It's just Amazon and Apple use music as loss leader for everything else they do. In my opinion, if Spotify can't get a hold of their business model in the next few years, so we could potentially see something like that if they kind of have some negative black swan event. I do also think we're going to see some wild like collaborations between the dead and the living. Joe Cocker today just announced like he sold his estate to Irving Azov's like management company, and they have now bought a few, and it includes like all these crazy rights. And there's no talk about it with AI, but it just shows me like all of these estates are often going to be owned by like third parties who just want to exploit it. And AI is going to get in from there. And I think, are people going to care about new songs and content from their favorite artists from 40 years ago if they know it's not them?
I think people will listen to it.
If they do, what is that going to mean for new artists today who are not only competing with more songs being released from artists today, but are also like competing with like the new Beatles song?
Right. Wow. I never thought about that. That's crazy. That is very intense. Very interesting. Okay, cool. Well, appreciate that. I know that's putting you on the spot, so that's a tough thing to answer, but that's a really good one. I really like that. Let's close out. We'll move into a speed run. But before we do that, where if people really love music, they want to learn more about kind of the intersection of music, technology, etc., kind of help us out. Where can we go to either follow you or to learn from you?
Yes, so follow me on Twitter, Abelow Rob. I'm there every day. And then I write a weekly newsletter called Where Music's Going. That's quick. It's a few minutes. It's me ranting for a minute or two and then giving like, the way I look at it is like at the top of it is like how to think in where we're going. The next is like how to do. And then there's a little bit of like the news. So it's like a short, brief, easy read that's helpful for people who are navigating the space one way or another.
Awesome. And we'll put the links to both the Twitter and his newsletter in the show notes, so you can always find it there. All right, as we always do, let's wrap up with a bit of a speed round. Rob, I've got a couple different questions for you, and we'll let you answer. The first one is, what's an NFT that you'll never sell?
Yeah, so this one easy for me. It's a Black Dave token. Actually, this probably gives like a good idea of like the complexity of what a music NFT is and why it's valuable that we talked about. So Black Dave is a rapper, huge anime fan, and like one of the smartest people I've met in the last couple of years in this journey, and everyone should go follow him on Twitter. He's an artist who's released music NFTs in like incredibly innovative ways. Like every time he does it, it's to kind of like push the envelope of what's possible with this technology. But he released the Black Dave token. It was like a million of them or something. I forget how much it was. And it was like this open-ended, like, I have good ideas, invest in them. And that's like it. And it was like, so like the whole idea was like, it's just people who already like jive with him and like, you're awesome. And you bought it. What it ended up being is like funding his ideas, but it's like a chat. And that chat is only like 80 of us. Everybody who thinks the way he does or adjacent to it. And it's become like the most valuable kind of thing like that I always go back to. And it just shows you like his music NFTs were interesting and innovative. It made me follow him. He released this. It just got me like deeper down the chains. And now like we're in conversation every day and he'll support like anything he does.
Oh, that's super cool. I love that. Okay, what's your favorite AI or Web3 tool to increase productivity?
Have you used Oasis?
Oasis
at all?
I don't think so. Is it AI?
It's AI. It's like voice memo or like voice notes on your phone, but like AI. Pretty much like if I'm walking my dog or if I'm in the car or like whatever, and you have an idea, I'll hit Oasis and you can just ramble into it. And then it has like 25 different formats that'll take your ramble and put into text. So it'll be like a TikTok script, a LinkedIn post, a text to your friend, and it puts it in like the language or like a professional email, and it'll like clean it up, make sense of it. And I actually find it amazing just because it's like you have these ephemeral ideas And it takes it, and it like, not only does it like, it's really good AI. Actually, like they do a thing where they make a song, they'll make a song. It's so much easier when it's done. It pops up and you kind of just like pick the thing you want, like send it to my Notion, send it to a friend. I love it.
Wow. Cool. I'm going to download that one right after this. I love that. Sweet. All right. Last question. This one we always ask to all of our guests. It's always a fun one. If you had a billboard that 1 billion people would see, what would you write on it?
I think challenge the default setting, which is for me something I try to say to myself constantly. Default mode, which could be anything from, the mood I'm in or like the way I go about thinking about things. When I talk to artists, especially in this space, it's always that. It's like, let's start back from first principles and challenge the default. Like, does that make sense for you? I don't think we do that enough. I
love that. That's how you create change. Get out of the comfort zone, get out of that default setting, and that's how things change. That's how you change the world. I love that. Rob, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation. We're going to have to get you on here again as technology continues to find its way into music, which it's been doing for 30, 40, 50 years. Music industry is always getting completely wrecked by technology. So it's fun to learn about what's happening and where we think it's going. But thanks for all the work you're doing. I appreciate for everything that you're writing in the newsletter and what you're doing on Twitter as well. It helps me learn. And so listeners, hopefully you'll go check his stuff out if you want to continue to learn as well. But Rob, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
Awesome. All right. Well, you take care.
Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Web3 Academy, your one trusted source to capitalize on the next big phase of the internet. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and subscribe or follow so that you don't miss the next one. While you're at it, there's a link in the description for our free newsletter where we provide timely and relevant Web3 insights so you can confidently build and invest in Web3. Make sure to subscribe today. One final note. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Crypto and Web3 are risky, and you should never invest more than you're willing to lose. Thank you, friends, and see you in the next one.